Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sirkar Harritt. I'm the Sufi Faith Director for the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council. I want to thank the Climate Council of Greater Kansas City for organizing this year's 2024 Earth Festival and allowing us to participate. And thanks for all of you for coming. First, a little bit about the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council. The council is made up of counselors from 22 different faith traditions. And our primary work is to increase multi-faith understanding. We provide educational programs about the many diverse faith traditions represented in the Kansas City area. Among our goals is to make the community more aware of the spiritual values that can help resolve issues related to environmental and other challenges facing society. This has led us to organize this forum today. For many people of faith and for others, the heat waves, droughts, wildfires, floods, storms, and other extreme weather events leave no doubt that human activities have brought about climate change and the disruption of the balance of nature and is straining the complex, interconnected web of life. And these changes are having disastrous impacts on the lives of people all over the world. Also, almost all the world's faith traditions hold sacred humanity's relationship with creation. Scriptures urge us to act on this relationship by caring for nature, by seeing God's grandeur and presence in creation, by being thankful for the bounty God has given us, and responding or connecting to nature in other ways. Faith leaders and members of faith communities are recognizing that their faiths call upon them to seek ways to help reverse the climate crisis and to take action. With these things in mind, we have organized this Interfaith Forum, Earth Day, Faith, Hope, and Action. We will begin shortly with presentations from our panel offering Buddhist, Catholic, and Native American faith perspectives on why and how their faiths are calling them to care for creation and take action. Following the panel, we will hear brief overviews of climate action work from area environmental groups to help you think about ways that you can be involved. And then we'll break into a small group or a couple of small groups and discuss why we are called to care for the earth and how we can become more involved or deepen the climate action work of our faith communities or as individuals. So I will introduce our panel members all together and then invite them to come one at a time in order up to the microphone, up to the podium. Our first speaker will be Nicole Esquibel, who has been practicing Buddhism for over 20 years and has been a member of the Rime Center since 2007 and a board member since 2019. Second speaker will be Brian Rowe, an independent the environmental correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter, an independent newspaper headquartered in Kansas City. He is the lead reporter for EarthMeet and NCR's reporting project on faith, climate change, and environmental justice. And our final speaker will be Danelle Crawford McKinney, who is an enrolled member of the Seston Wahpeton Dakota Wate, I pronounce that close, and a teaching elder in the Presbyterian Church. Danelle has been taught many traditions and values regarding Mother Earth and her teaching. She currently works at Haskell Indian Nations University, working as a student rights specialist. So, Nicole, thank you.
Woo, Nicole!
I got a fan club out there. Thank you all for inviting me to come and speak today. I feel like I'm filling some pretty large shoes with Lama Matt's absence, and I know he's with us here in spirit today, even though he can't physically be with us today. So the prompt that we received for this panel was, why and how my faith calls me to care for creation. So I figured I'd start with the why and then move into the how part of this whole thing. So in Buddhism, we start, and I'm going to keep an eye on the clock there, a tendency once a microphone's in front of me to talk a little bit. We have what are known as the Four Noble Truths. It is kind of the foundation of all Buddhist teachings. The first of these is that suffering is pervasive presence in our lives. And even when things are good, we still feel this underlying anxiety. The second is the course of suffering, mistaken beliefs that we are independent, separate, and solid. We struggle so hard to secure this self which keeps us in samsara, or cyclic existence. The third of these noble truths is the end of suffering. We see that these illusions of self and this separate self are temporary, almost like the clouds in the sky. And the fourth is the path, and this is obviously the most important and probably moves into the how part of what we're going to talk about today, and that's our spiritual practice. That's being able to live ethically and develop wisdom as we walk across the earth. In my tradition, Mahayana Buddhism, there's this ideal of the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva vows to work toward relieving the suffering of all sentient beings and aspiring to live with these vows directly as we begin to work with climate disruption. So that's kind of the why part of it. Now let's get into a bit of the how. Well, first for me anyway, is that I have to see that my personal happiness, my deep joy comes from helping others. And I think that's true for most of us, because when we see climate disruption take place or a natural disaster take place, most of us often just immediately go to help our neighbor. And we continually try to help one another get through whatever disruption is taking place. Now, I think that one of the steps that we as a faith community needs to take is really begin to look at how this climate disruption is beginning to affect marginalized communities. I think they are oftentimes the most at risk. So with that perspective of helping others, individually I can begin to lose my self-centeredness, begin to see how I can diminish my own individual greed. So that's one of the areas that I begin to work with as I'm walking this path of hopefully climate change. The second is this idea that we are interconnected. And I think that no matter what faith we're going to hear from today, there is an interconnected to this. We can't have our own well-being at the cost of others or with the well-being of the planet. We all are connected with one another, and that's a huge tenet within Buddhism. One of the other tenets of Buddhism that we often use is the precious human life that we are given. This thought of being given this precious human life turns us towards the Dharma. We've been given the gift, not just to practice Buddhism, but to be helpful stewards of the planet and begin to take care of this earth. So as we begin to practice as Buddhists, we start with ourselves and move out from there. First by purifying one's own mind, and we do this primarily through a meditation practice. And what this does is usually it causes 3 or 4 things to happen. First is it promotes contentment and a serenity, a simplicity of our own lives. We begin to utilize wisdom and understand the long-range, long-term consequences of our actions. Hopefully, third, this meditation practice allows us to arouse a heart of compassion, extending loving concern for not just the people that are closest to us, but every sentient being that we come in contact with, and really beginning to see the worth and potential and dignity of every living being on this planet. So in our Buddhist community, we are trying to take certain external actions along the way. First, we're trying to get out there and vote. Vote for candidates who admit that humans have caused climate change and are willing to act against that. We are also willing to write and sign letters to our representatives and begin to call on their offices to make climate change legislation possible. We also like to support mom and pop businesses rather than shopping at larger chain stores. Shopping within your neighborhood. We love folks to get moving, to actually put their feet in action and participate in marches and demonstrations, or to take direct action such as working to stop climate change and climate-destroying projects such as pipelines, oil rigs, fracking, things of that nature. We would love for folks to begin to shift away from an agricultural model that's industrial in nature and move to more earth-based agricultural processes, including shifting towards a plant-based diet and a climate-friendly diet as well. One of the things that Buddhists love, we love vows. We take vows at different points in our spiritual progress. And I spoke about the Bodhisattva. Well, I'm going to give you eco-sattva vows. And this comes from a book called Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on this earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in the work of the world and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Brian Rowe, and I'm a reporter with National Catholic Reporter. So I'll talk a little bit about why and how the Catholic Church approaches creation care, approaches environmental issues, and things like climate change as well. And then really I'm going to spend more time just talking about what the Church has been doing, especially under the papacy of Pope Francis. So I think one of the main starting points for the Catholic Church when it comes to creation is the belief that God created all things, all species, all plants, all animals, humans, and by doing so, each of those has intrinsic value in itself. So respecting them is respecting God. And the church talks about 3 fundamental relationships that humans have specifically. That's with God, with neighbor, and specifically also with creation. So that's an important aspect of it as well. And then church teaching also talks about humanity's been given a responsibility to tend over what God has created, to tend over the planet, but that doesn't mean using it as we feel, as we want, and kind of at our own whim. We have to be responsible in how we use the resources of the planet, not just for ourselves today, but also for future generations, for the people who come after us. Whenever I talk with people about climate change, talk to Catholics who are active in this, they always point back to a specific starting point, that this isn't an environmental issue, it is a moral issue, it's a human and social issue. A lot of what we know about with climate change is that the people who are most vulnerable to its impacts are those who are often marginalized or economically poor, and these are often people as well who have contributed the least to the issue, who have not having large carbon footprints, not producing emissions at the way that countries like the United States and other industrial parts of the world are doing. So that's a problem of justice right there. And Pope Francis talks about that a lot in Laudato Si. There's a very well-known phrase that he kind of, he didn't create or didn't write, but has uplifted, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. It's this idea that environmental and social issues aren't separate, but they're intertwined. And to address things like climate change, deforestation, and things of that nature, you can't just focus on that problem. There's social, economic issues that need to be addressed with it. You can't do one without the other. So that's really where the church is coming from this, and that idea of everything is connected that was just mentioned, that's something that the Catholic Church also talks about very regularly. That, again, that you can't address environmental issues without addressing larger social issues as well. So what is the church doing? And I think a good starting place right now is just talking about Pope Francis. So he became Pope in 2013. In 2015, he wrote an encyclical, which is a major papal teaching document that got a lot of attention. It was called Laudato Si, on care for our common home. And in that document is basically a compendium of what church teaching has said about the environment, about environmental issues, talks about climate change. It's a very thorough, wide-ranging document. It pulls from writings and teachings from bishops' conferences around the world. It pulls from previous popes. It's a really good place to look for if you're curious what the Catholic Church thinks about these issues and says about these issues. That's a great place to start. So he didn't stop with just Laudato Si. He's just this past October, he wrote another document called Laudate Deum, in which he basically followed up Laudato Si, and where Laudato Si may have talked it had sections about climate change, and it talked about how the climate is a common good, and it talked about the need to move away from fossil fuels and things of that nature. Laudate Deum is pretty much entirely on climate change. In fact, it's subtitled On the Climate Crisis. And basically, it's Pope Francis speaking against the world and saying that we are not acting quickly enough, we're not acting with the seriousness that the science is pointing us to, and time is becoming more limited to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, to avoid the suffering that especially people on the margins of society are going to feel most. So that was just this past October. But within the church, he's also done a lot to try to uplift and amplify the idea of creation care as a core piece of being what it means to be a Catholic, what it means to be Christian. Some examples are he's invited the Catholic Church, well, he's put on the church calendar the World Day of Prayer for the Cure of Creation on September 1st. Other Christian denominations had already been celebrated in the past, but he basically put the Catholic Church up there as well. Similarly, the season of creation from September 1 to October 4th, he's encouraged Catholics to observe that. He's added care for creation to the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And he's met with everyone. He's met with oil executives. He's met with climate activists. He's met with environmental groups. He's met with world leaders. Pretty much in any of those meetings, you see him talking about climate change and environmental issues. And then, more than just kind of talking and kind of amplifying this issue, one of the core things with Laudato Si was urging people to act. And we often hear, especially as I do reporting, talking to people, and they ask, well, what can we do about it? What is the church doing about it? So one of the big initiatives that the Vatican has created, this was launched in 2021, was called the Laudato Si Action Platform. And this is basically a very ambitious initiative by the Vatican where it's inviting church institutions at all levels, so we're talking parishes, dioceses, Catholic hospitals, Catholic schools, anything and everything in between, religious orders, to create 7-year plans to act on Laudato Si through a number of sustainability and ecological measures. That could be switching to clean energy, that could be looking at your investments in terms of how you're supporting renewable or climate solutions. It could be adding adding creation teaching into liturgical celebrations, or just kind of including like ecological teachings from the church more within your parishes, priests talking about it in homilies. So it's a very big platform, and we're seeing more and more church Catholic institutions adopting that as well. How are we doing on time? Great. And then the last thing that I'll talk about with Pope Francis is, under him, the Vatican is very much engaging the United Nations. So you hear about these UN climate summits, the COPs. So Pope Francis was supposed to be the first pope to ever attended one of these in November in Dubai, but unfortunately he got sick, so he wasn't able to go. But under him, the Vatican, the Holy See, has signed up onto the Paris Agreement, has officially joined the UN Convention on Climate Change. So it's an active member, it has a voice at the table, which kind of, there's a lot of faith groups that are advocating and talking and pushing for action within these environments. This allows the church to be on the same level as a country, because the Holy See is a small nation, but in the UN world, all nations are equal in size. So that's a big thing that we're watching to see whether the church can have influence in that level as opposed to maybe how it had been engaging in the past. There's a lot of things that are going on at the national level too. I was going to go US, the Vatican, then national, then local. I'll just quickly say on the US level, we see a lot of activity in terms of universities, whether that's kind of creating their own kind of sustainability plans, divesting from fossil fuels. About 10 Catholic schools have divested from fossil fuels and announced that publicly. We see action, especially among religious orders. Catholic sisters have been leading for decades the church on environmental concern in a lot of ways. Even the Vatican was catching up to what Catholic sisters have been doing for, like I said, for decades in their own communities, in their own advocacy, in their own work. So they've been leading a lot on that. And then just here in Kansas City, and this is kind of not just in Kansas City, but at the local level, we see creation care teams forming at parishes, looking at things like how are we reducing waste in our operations? Are there ways that we can adopt solar energy for our campus and things like that? And I know here in Kansas City, there's a number of parishes that have created those, and within the Kansas City St. Joseph Diocese, they've also are working to kind of coordinate those groups as for a larger kind of diocesan-wide initiative. And then, I mean, there's also examples like Jerusalem's Farm and New Roots, which are agricultural programs here in Kansas City, led by Catholic organizations. So hopefully that kind of gives a nice summary of what the Catholic Church is kind of really doing on this issue and why they care in the first place. So thank you.
Ohami takitapi, Ianko mi imakiapie, Dakota ia, Danelle McKinney imakiapie. Hello, my relatives. I'm really glad to be here today. What I explained to you was I introduced myself in my Dakota language. My native name is Running Woman, and it's kind of a crazy way how I got that name, but I guess if you think of me in terms of tardiness, that might be how I got it. But my name is Danelle McKinney. I'm really happy to be here. Sorry. That's okay. Before we start though, this was not a part of my presentation, but this is kind of important to me, so I would like to take just a moment to acknowledge the land that we are standing on. The lands that were here hundreds of years ago, this was a hub for Sac and Fox, for Potawatomi, for all different kinds of indigenous cultures. And so today I want to acknowledge that land, this land that was pretty much the stomping grounds of all of those indigenous tribes and cultures. I would just like to take a moment of silence to recognize those cultures and those communities. Thank you. What I want to do first is when I became, I've always been a Dakota person. I've always known my tribal traditions and cultures, but I was taught to suppress it. And so I was primarily raised in the Reformed tradition of the Presbyterian Church USA. However, throughout my teachings, one of the things that the elders have taught me is that when you go to speak to somebody that you respect, you give them a gift. You let them know that you're coming to them in a good way. And so I'm doing that by bringing you a gift to let you know that I'm coming to you in a good way. And so what I have here is some tea. We call it Ponca silver tea, and I don't want to scare you, it's coming from a lead plant. Now, a lead plant isn't really a plant made out of lead. It got its name a long time ago because people thought that this plant grew where lead was underneath the ground, and that is not true at all. But this plant is really good it's a legume actually, and it's good at cleaning out your lungs. It's slightly a diuretic, so if you ever find yourself drinking Ponca silver tea, you don't want to drink too much. But here's a sample of it, and I wanted to bring you all a sample just to let you know that this is something that's really important to us. My experience with this tea was the very first time I drank it, my body knew what that flavor was, even though I had never tasted it before in my life. So my DNA connected with this tea. And so I would like to invite you to come forward and grab yourself a little sample. I didn't put too much in there, but I wanted you to have a taste of it. It's very delicious. This is my gift to all of you to let you know that I'm coming to you in a good way. I don't mean to speak any harm. I don't mean to say anything that might offend anyone. So I just want to let you know that I have the best intentions with what I'm sharing with you today. My presentation today is mainly an activity. It's mainly an exercise to walk you through what it's like for an Indigenous person to experience creation. And then I will tell a little bit about, I'll tell you a story about what's happened. It's been about 5 or 6 years now, but I will tell you a story about what happened with our Indigenous people. So if you can just imagine where you're sitting right now, take a look around where you're at. Look at the things that are around you. Look at the beauty of the windows. Take a moment to take a deep breath and smell the smell of this building. Look around. Listen to the sounds that you're hearing all around you. And feel what this temperature is like in this room. It's very comfortable. There are so many things about this holy place, this chapel, this place where people come to pray, to sing, to learn more, and to communicate with God. Now I want you to take a moment to close your eyes and imagine you're in your backyard, or you're at your favorite park, or you're someplace where you're outside. Imagine what it looks like out there. As you look around, you know that there are no ceilings. If there are, you can't see them. You can, if you listen, you can hear the songs of the birds. You can hear the chatter of animals out there. If you take a deep breath in, you can smell what the grass smells like, especially on this spring day. You can smell different smells. You can smell the woods. You can smell the trees. You can smell different things. And even if you're in the city, you might smell a little bit of the city. But it's your temple where you're at. Maybe you put your feet on the ground without any shoes on, and you can feel the grass between your toes, and you can feel the ground underneath you. Some people say that Indigenous people, when they put their feet on the ground, if they pray long enough, if they listen long enough, if they just are with God long enough, they can feel the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Ina Makan is what we call her. Her grass, the tall grasses that she grows every year, is her hair. You can see when you look at the rivers from a high space, you can see that the juices that run through her veins. You can see that everything that we get comes from Mother Earth. Now, as you come back to this conversation, you want to recognize that for Indigenous people, it's not always about going to a place. It's always recognizing that wherever you are specifically connected to creation that was specifically made for you. I'm going to tell you a story about the Indigenous peoples. This is something that was kind of surprising to us. We didn't expect this to happen. But a while back in 2016, they were building the Dakota Access Pipeline through Bismarck, North Dakota. The residents of Bismarck did not want that pipeline going through their community, so they rerouted it to go right straight through the lands of the Nakota people. Standing Rock, as you might have heard. And so, literally, from all ends of the planet, Indigenous people came and they camped there to try to stop the access pipeline. And while they were there, the local people decided, well, you have porta potties that you bought here, but we're going to take those away. Even though the Indigenous people were paying for it, they took it away. But to the Indigenous people, it didn't matter, because they went right back to their old ways, the ways that mattered to them. And it was just instinctive. And every time I hear that story, or every time I think about that, I want to laugh. Not because we got somebody on anything, but because we've been through so much hardship. We've been through so much trauma that it takes a lot to knock us down. And at one point, on Standing Rock, the temperature got to 20 below. And the people who were fighting for the pipeline got their water hoses and they sprayed it on the indigenous people, on the water protectors, is what we called ourselves. And they were hit with thick bullets. They were sprayed with cold air in 20 below zero temperatures. They were placed in dog kennels to try to stop them from stopping that pipeline. But as things would have it, no one expected that many people, that many Native Americans would show up someplace. And we were able to get that off the tribal land. The aquifer, the Ogallala Aquifer, which lies beneath, which provides water to even Kansas City, is in danger still because of that pipeline. And that's what the people were fighting for. They weren't fighting for their own lands, they were fighting for all of humanity. And that's what indigenous people like to do. We like to be hands-on. We like to make sure that we are so connected that we can see, we can smell, we can hear, we can feel, we can taste creation that's all around us. Because without all of those senses, we can't be connected. And so we want to do the same when it comes to understanding creation and humanity and working together to make this a healing spot. Mother Earth has been traumatized. I've seen a mountain that was completely degraded because of mining. It's no longer the same. And sometimes our bodies are like that too. When you look at Native people, you can see our bodies are ravaged. And it's almost like a reflection of what Mother Earth has gone through. But the one thing we got going is resilience. That's one thing that the ancestors taught us was resilience, and there's always hope for healing. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank our speakers. We've had the gift of this tea, but we've also had the gift of their wisdom, of the energy of their hearts, and their care for the earth. So let's give them another round. What's been shared, one of the principles of the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council is to recognize the wisdom that comes from all of our different faith traditions. And I think what we've just seen here is that perhaps we are more alike than our seeming differences.
Yes.
That we all have this deep connection, whether we are always aware of it or not, with the earth. We're dependent on the earth. And each of our faith traditions call us to act on that care and really strengthen that relationship and take whatever actions we can for a hopeful future. So thank you again. Thank you all for being here.